Ladies and gentlemen, I am the Price of Wargaming, and I would like to talk to you about Necrons. Because I have no content on my channel, so I figured why not do what I do best, and what I do best in Warhammer is Necron tactics. So, without further ado, let me talk about the troops that the Necrons have, and some HQ-related upgrades, and some dedicated transports. Because we only have 2 troops, I don't really have a lot to talk about, so... yeah. Anyway, starting off with Necron Warriors. Necron Warriors are obviously the hardy assholes that make up a huge bulk of your army, unless you're probably going for a more specialist thing, and trying to ape Space Marines with Necron Immortals. But I digress. Necron Warriors. Space Marine stat line, 4-up armor, and that nasty resurrection which makes people hate them. But, concerning the resurrection. Resurrection is good. Resurrection is amazing. But remember this. If you put in a Lord with a resurrection orb, that's going to cost you the equivalent price of 5 Necron Warriors. Wouldn't you rather have 5 more Necron Warriors as opposed to 1 Lord with a resurrection orb? Because his toughness and strength 5 is wasted, his attacks are wasted, and the amazing weapon that he can take, being the War Scythe, being one of the best weapons in the whole of 40k, is wasted. And the Staff of Light is great, don't get me wrong, but it's only a 12-inch range, so you probably won't get there if you're playing Necron Warrior Resurrection Camp in your own area, grabbing an objective, because 20 Necron Warriors, behind cover, with a Resurrection Orb, do not die. And if there's a Ghost Arc next to them, they will probably end the game with still 20 guys in their unit. So yeah. But anyway, Necron Warriors are very competitive as a unit choice, because they are pretty cheap for what they do. They're not overcosted, they're not undercosted. They're about as tough as a Space Marine, considering, because, yeah, okay, sure, that 3+ armor that the Space Marines have is way better. But when you compare it to the 5-up that you get after you die, you actually have the same survivability against AP5 and worse weapons when comparing yourself to a Space Marine. And of course you have Leadership 10, which is great. And your gun can kill Land Raiders if you are really lucky. So they're a pretty good choice for basically anything. But they're slow. And most infantry is pretty slow, but they don't really tend to get anywhere. They're Necrons. But you can always teleport them with a Monolith, or you can make them Deep Strike with a Cryptek, but generally speaking, Warriors are blobs. They're blobs, they're big blobs, they don't die, and they're blobs. Put 15 of them in a Night Scythe, have a moving blob. But once you blob out the blob, it's going to stay there being blobby for the rest of the game, more than likely. But, you know, it's always nice to just fly over, drop 15 warriors, and then the enemy can say goodbye to those 2 Leman Russes they had parked over there in 1 unit. That's nasty. Because Necron Warriors have Gauss Flayers. Gauss Flayers are bolters. Like, literally bolters. But Gauss Flayers also have this unique ability to glance any vehicle on a 6. And that's nasty. Really nasty. I've taken out Baneblades with that. I mean, not regularly, but once. But still, you can take out anything. I do remember taking out an Imperial Knight with that with ease, even with his 4-up invul. That was great. I did really well, but that's an armor value that a Space Marine could not scratch for the life of him. But you could just do it. You could just... anything. 6 up, it's just glanced. And a few more glancing hits and it's dead. Completely dead. And if you got a 20-man warrior blob that you can actually teleport in, maybe using a monolith or something, well, then you can just maybe field Nemesis or Zandrak as the Necron Lord supporting them, and end up with a unit of 20 warriors with Tank Hunter. That is painful. That is very painful. That can kill basically any vehicle. Super heavies too. Especially if you deep strike a monolith, walk a bunch of guys out, and then just rapid fire into them to death. That's 40 shots. Hitting on 3s, glancing on 6s, rerolling. Oh dear. And if you're like me and you roll lucky way too often, your opponents will hate you for using a tactic like that. Necron warriors are just too versatile to not use. And they're not expensive enough to cry when they die. They're just warriors. The only nasty things that will probably happen to your warriors is if you take a smaller unit, your opponent focuses fire, or your opponent ignores cover and has a bunch of AP4 weapons. Yeah, that's painful, and then your 10 guys are dead and they won't res. And that's a shame, because if Necron Warriors did not res, and Necron Immortals did not res, then they would be kind of horrible. But they're not, so there you have it. Necron Immortals, though, these guys are a bit different, in my opinion, because, well, obviously they have different stats and guns, but their purpose is... I don't use them as shock troops. I would probably use them as... Okay, sure, even if I put a Necron Lord in them, which is expensive, like I said before, and you might actually prefer to have a bunch of less expensive dudes, for obvious reasons. I mean, points aren't unlimited, you know? You might consider putting that Lord in them to make them hardier, because you could just... Like I said, Nightside's great. You could just fly it forward, poop out 10 Necron Immortals with a Lord, and then you just have this, again, a blob, but a smaller blob. But these guys are really, really annoying to kill with their 3-up armor saves. It's really annoying to take them down. Especially if that Lord is in there, and they are standing next to an objective. Because they are, after all, troops. And they will have objective secured unless you're playing Unbound, and if you're playing Necrons, why would you play Unbound? Your troops are amazing. So yeah. And you have some forward shock troops, basically. Some... What's the word for that, really? It's not scouting, it's just... They arrive later, and they're just there on the board. And they don't move. They don't move! They only move for things like... Okay, they move if you tank shock them, but... What are the odds of actually pulling off a proper tank shock on those guys? I mean, they're leadership 10. They're not gonna fall back, they're just going to shimmy out of the way of your tank. And as we all know, if you take Gauss Blasters on Necron Immortals, which is actually not the optimal way to go, Math Hammering proves that the Tesla guns are actually a bit better, not by a really big amount, but they're a bit better. Getting 2 bonus hits, two bonus hits on a 6 is pretty amazing. I'm not sure why it's 2 bonus hits and not just 1. I thought 2 was a bit much, especially if you roll 3 6s on an Annihilation Barge, which tends to happen to me. Your opponents will hate you forever and ever. Anyway, so you'll probably get glanced to death, or you will get charged by the Lord. Well, I mean, if you're putting a Lord in a forward unit of Immortals, you're probably going to give him a War Scythe, because those Strength 7 AP1 hits for 10 points are pretty sweet. That kills most things. Oh yeah, Strength 7 Armor Bane. Yeah, that's painful. That's really, really painful. Actually, that's kind of the Necron thing, isn't it? Most of our things are really, really painful. Necrons don't tend to hit at long ranges as much, because all of our weapons have a tendency of being 24 inches, except for the Doomsday Cannon and the Eldritch Lance from the Cryptek Harbinger of Destruction, which is pretty good, by the way. It's all very painful, and it's all very reliable too. Necrons are a very, very reliable army. I mean, that's kind of their point, really. They're really noob-friendly, because whatever you do, you're probably not going to get punished much for making some tactical errors, because most of the dudes that died are just going to get back up. Or they have some other tricks on their sleeves. Not that they have sleeves anymore. They lost those along with their emotions during the biotransference process, but, you know, being immortal pharaoh zombie robot things is, It was a pretty good deal, you know, for losing sleeves and emotions and other unmentionables. But yeah. Necron Immortals and Warriors are both competitive choices in terms of troops, but I would personally not foot slog a bunch of Immortals across the board. They're too valuable for that. Pop them in a Night Scythe, put them wherever you want. That's the beauty of reserves, after all. And have them... You should probably give them a form of Cryptek or Lord to buff them, or give them some close combat ability. Because if you put them forward, they're probably going to get charged. Like, even Space Marines could, in close combat, when charging Necron Immortals, could still do some pretty major damage, because Necron Immortals are, as you all know, they're like Initiative 2, which means that they almost always hit last, except against Terminators, which have 2+ armor saves, oh dear. So that would not be a very wise course of action, would it? No, not really. You'll want to keep the enemy at that beautiful 24-inch range, and then unleash Tesla on them, roll way too many 6s, get your opponent all annoyed, and then get those sweet 3-ups to wound on Space Marines and 2-ups on Guardsmen. Guardsmen get 5-up armor saves against those, and that just doesn't feel right. But honestly, if Tesla guns were all like AP anything, except for AP 6 maybe, they might be a bit more overpowered. They're already really strong. I mean, have you ever seen anybody with a light vehicle think, ah, Tesla guns are not important? No, they fear Tesla guns, as they should, because they're just amazing. Tesla destructors and cannons and everything just wreck light vehicles, because vehicles just don't really seem to have any form of armor save, because they already have armor you should penetrate. So, you know, AP Dash doesn't really matter, because this is not 5th edition, and we don't get a penalty for AP Dash weapons. Or was that 4th? I don't know, I've only been playing since 6th. And I had my rulebook for like a year, and then I bought this. Because GW likes to make money. If this doesn't last for like 4 years, I'm really going to get this. This shit is expensive, man. Anyway. So, yeah. Necron Troops. They're good. Bring them. Just don't think you'll get anywhere by walking them across the board, because that's not going to happen. You've got skimmers, you've got deep striping... Deep striping? That sounds like a painting technique. You've got deep striking up the wazoo. You can actually attach a Cryptek of Despair to any unit you want, and have them deep strike. Any unit. You could just... As soon as they're on the board, I'm gonna deep strike these guys. And you can do it every turn too, unless you're in combat, obviously, but you really can't do much in combat anyway. That's kind of what close combat is for. But yeah, that's what Necrons do. Their troops barely die, ever. Anyway, so that's it for Necron Troops. I was going to discuss dedicated transports and HQ choices too, but honestly, I'm already rambling on quite a bit. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about HQ choices and... well, HQ choices next, because I'm also going to talk about named characters. And I have to admit, I'm not a really big fan of named characters, except for Nemesor Zandrak in Codex Necrons, because the Necron Overlord by standard is really good! Necron Overlords wreck house everywhere. Anyway, that's it for this episode. If you like Necron Tactica, and if you like anything concerning Warhammer, you should subscribe to my channel for no particular reason. I'm deadly serious, you should really subscribe to this channel. It would probably be the best decision you're going to make all day. Except for maybe that hamburger. That hamburger was a pretty good decision. Anyway, have a nice day.